Well, it was a day like many others, right? Get an email. It's from a scientist named Haskell, and he wanted to borrow a specimen to use for some analysis. Just so it turned out that Haskell works for Columbia Sportswear, and he wanted to borrow a polar bear pelt.
No one had ever really quantitatively determined how much solar radiation gets through the fur to reach the skin. We ended up using that knowledge to develop fleeces and outerwear that work on the principle of capturing solar radiation for bonus warmth.
This garment I'm wearing right here was inspired by one of the pelts of a polar bear from our collection.
For decades, it's been theorized that polar bears have a hidden trick that helps them stay warm in the Arctic. They may look white, but their skin is jet black and their fur is made up of transparent, hollow fibers. Why? So the theory goes, this combination creates a fuzzy greenhouse effect where light can pass right through the hollow fur like a window and get absorbed by the black skin where it stays trapped as heat. Pretty clever, but does it actually work that way? No one had put it to the test until now.
This story was told all across the company, all the way from the very top. People were constantly, I want to see the pelt, and so we'd lay it out and cover the whole table. My name is Haskell Beckham. I'm the VP of Innovation at Columbia Sportswear. We've launched products in the past that are based on nature, like gecko feet. So there's a popular belief, if you just Google polar bear fur, you'll find all kinds of,
I guess you could call it internet talk, that say that polar bear hair and skin is specifically designed to absorb heat.
but there wasn't a lot of scientific support for that.
So we wanted to put that to the test because we had the idea to develop a fabric that did the same thing.
And so my first stop was the Oregon Zoo. I said, I need to talk to your polar bear keepers. And they just looked at me and said, who the heck are you?
I think it really speaks to Haskell and his his drive to just go out and explore the unknown.
They connected me with someone who connected me with someone who connected me with someone who ultimately led me to the Burke Museum.
We had talked about this idea, and it seemed like a day or two later, he says, okay, I'm driving up to Seattle to go get a polar bear pelt. And we're like, okay, that sounds exciting.
Welcome to the Burke Museum Mammal Collection. We've got about 61,000 mammal specimens here in our collection. Most of those include a skull. That is the last thing a seal sees. About half of them include a skin. Yeah, I'm Jeff Bradley. I'm the collection manager of mammals here at the Burke Museum. This room is my favorite tool in the whole Burke. This is a minus 20-degree walk-in freezer. We're kind of chock-a-block with wolves, tiger, a couple seals perhaps, and a bunch of dead birds. We get our specimens from a lot of different sources. A lot of salvage animals from zoos and aquaria, members of the public donating roadkill or other animals that they find. And another way we get mammal specimens, seizures from customs officials. Someone tries to import a mammal that they don't have the permission to, and it's how we got this polar bear.
In order to test that fuzzy greenhouse theory, they had to use our pelt to simulate a polar bear, cool down the area to Arctic conditions, and then measure whether the simulated bear heated up when they turned on an artificial sun.
First, we had to figure out, all right, how do we get the level of sunlight that we need on a consistent basis?
It's not often sunny in Portland, right? So we have to bring the sun inside. And we used our little fancy tool here, which is our solar simulator.
Yeah, so this is used a lot in the solar panel industry to measure levels of efficiency. This provides the wavelength spectrum and the energy output of a sun. Oh,
Careful,
that's
right.
Here, we put the pelt on top of a thermoelectric hot plate.
This plate was maintained at 32 degrees Celsius, or about what skin temperature would be for a mammal like a polar bear.
And we also had a heat flux sensor underneath the pelt. And then we exposed, using a solar simulator in the lab, sunlight to the pelt. And then we measured how much heat got through the fur and was picked up by that heat sensor.
But did the artificial sun heat up the skin of our simulated polar bear?
What we discovered was most of the back part of the polar bear doesn't allow enough solar radiation to get through the fur and absorb into that pigmented skin, which means the skin color doesn't really matter for a large portion of the polar bear.
The fur is too thick to allow any solar penetration to the dark skin. So the dark skin is not helping the bear stay warm.
If this were an episode of Mythbusters, busted.
It's not what you would think. It's amazing how a little bit of conventional wisdom gets amplified. It was in a lot of popular media. It was a fairly common factoid you'd get everywhere.
5 surprising facts about polar bears. What looks like white fur is actually transparent hair.
Well, it has long been known that a polar bear's white fur transmits solar radiation for warmth.
Beneath that thick coat is black skin.
The black skin readily absorbs sunlight,
heating the bear like a thick blanket.
I might have even perpetuated that myth by telling that fact about polar bears a few dozen or 100 times to tours that have come through the Burke.
The myth might be busted, but Haskell and his team still had a jacket to make. Using what they learned from our pelt, could they get the concept behind the myth to work?
The main takeaway that we got from this research was knowing exactly what materials stack up we need.
We had to generate shell fabrics and insulation layers that allowed solar radiation to penetrate, unlike the majority of that solar bear.
That was a name.
Unlike the majority of that polar bear pelt that we studied.
On the surface, these look similar, but... So this is the Arctic shell
fabric.
All right.
and then this is a normal black jacket. So you can see
whoa.
at the surface of a jacket, it may just look like a black jacket, but it's optimized to allow as much light through as possible.
To prove the concept works, the team at Columbia compared how 2 squares of jacket material heated up internally when exposed to sunlight, the traditional kind versus their polar bear myth-inspired design. And sure enough, after 15 minutes in the artificial sun, their jacket technology was around 13 degrees Celsius warmer inside than the traditional version. But they wanted to show it in a real-life scenario too, so they got creative.
He's putting 2 jackets on. Basically what we're trying to capture with the thermal imaging camera is more heat being absorbed inside a jacket.
On the right, Patrick's wearing a traditional black Columbia puffy, and on the left, he's wearing the polar bear myth-inspired design. It's hard to show what's happening on the inside of a jacket, so Patrick put 2 pieces of tape on his chest. The tape absorbs the heat from the lining of the jackets, and it shows it to the thermal camera when he takes the jackets off.
In the full video, this one looks visibly warmer until I open the jacket and you see the tape.
Oh, that's perfect.
I never really thought about the research and development that goes into those. I thought a lot of it is market research. Do people like pink ones this year, or are they going camouflage ones this year? But those are serious scientists who are into material science and engineering.
But I told the team, I said, we should probably publish this stuff, but at the same time at Columbia Sportswear, our job isn't to publish papers, and certainly not something that outdoor companies typically are engaged in, right? So that was a little, I guess, labor of love on our part to get that publication out. We worked with some colleagues outside the company and put together a publication that was peer-reviewed and accepted for publication.
When it gets published, that's gonna go up on the fridge, I imagine?
It's on the wall, right there, yeah. I've been at Columbia for 7 years now.
So I've been here about 30 years all told. When we get a collection manager job, we're not likely to give them up. It's a pretty awesome job.
It's a great job. It's really about problem solving.
I love helping scientists. I love helping people ask questions. I love working with the mammals. I love figuring out questions in my database.
In particular, it's exciting when we solved a problem and develop new material that gets pulled into the line and gets commercialized. Because we do a lot of prototyping around here that never makes it that far. And I also give it to friends and family, explain the story of how it evolved. And so that's gratifying, right?
We're saving these thousands of mammal specimens for a reason, right? The answers to all kinds of questions about how our world works can be found right here in these drawers. In a lot of ways, the most exciting discoveries are going to come from new questions. Questions that people haven't thought to ask before, or maybe we didn't have the technology to be able to ask those questions, and now we do. As for this particular polar bear pelt, it's still an open question, right?
Why do they have these hollow, translucent fibers as their fur? Why is their skin black? You know, it really begs a whole new area of study to go and look at.
Every time a scientist disproves an old theory, they're a little bit closer to figuring out the truth of how it really works. And that's exactly what these collections like this are here for.